And we're live. Hello, everybody. There's Chaya saying shalom, shalom, Chaya. Thanks for joining us. Just popped on slightly early to make sure that we don't get dropped or anything, hopefully, because we had to occasionally get a few bits of problems when we're connecting to YouTube, but all seems to be well tonight. There's Brad saying good morning, good people. Good morning, Brad. Excuse me, thanks for joining us. Absolutely freezing here. We've had hailstones today. And we're having a bit of a funny week actually, but we had our cooker exploded last week, so we've just got a new one arrived today. So the first time we've had a cooker in about a week, and the joy of sort of cooking out of hot plates and slow cookers and things like that. It's been fun, but it's a real cold one here today. And we're about to get on with chapter 8, folks. There's Joseph saying hello, Joseph. Hope you're keeping well. And I got a wee before we kick off today. Let me see if I can just bring this up on the screen. I got a letter from Cynthia, actually, just who has to run off, actually. Excuse me. A wee bit early from some of the sessions that we're having. And because she had to leave early, she thought she'd send along a few additional comments regarding chapter 7 from last week. And I thought, just to quickly read through some of them, I'd asked her if she didn't mind too much. And I thought some of them were quite good wee points, actually. Let me just see. I'll just have a wee read through. And it was just, first one was in relation to Leto and Jessica, referring to their new home is hideous. And just basically saying, given the highlights regarding what we learn about Jessica and Leto's relationship in this chapter, I thought it was interesting that Leto decides to call the place hideous at the outset, maybe as a reflection of his own situation on Arrakis, or what eyes accustomed to the water-green sun of Caladan would see in the first hours in a desert, a sense of the uncanny. Excuse me. Maybe it's a more local response to the informality and disorder of the houses, with boxes, crates, and lack of routine security. His full sentence also suggests that the word hideous describes a place where you can lose yourself. And has he lost himself already, or fears that he will? What type of loss is hideous, and what aspect of self is hideous when lost? At this point in the chapter, Jessica persists in calling the house bleak and cold, but does not openly agree with Leto's description. So Jessica uses the word herself only after her encounter with the native Fremen Mapes and her willing participation in the mission area protectiva. Readers aren't really told why Mapes' reference to a Reverend Mother denotes danger. Maybe her choice of words suggests her grudging response to being part of the legend or the one. Or it's a statement of solidarity with another Bene Gesserit sister, the early resident of Arrakis who presumably spread the legends under Bene Gesserit direction. Maybe it's a deliberate nod to a recent spat with Leto, her own acknowledgement that she is becoming savage and driven like him, now that the thing must take its course. I thought that bit was particularly interesting, and it's something that I want to point out really about Jessica at the end of this chapter. So just the suggestion that she's becoming a wee bit like him. And the other point that Cynthia was making, which I thought was quite interesting, was regards the imagery of the bull's head and the painting of Leto's father as a matador. And just regarding those points, Flotsam and Jetsam, regarding the old Duke and the bullhead, encountering and then putting a stuffed head on the wall must be a new experience for Mapes. It seems so un-Fremen, yet she is instantly fond of it, talking to it, imagining the beast it once was, and not disturbed by the blood. Maybe she takes on some of the essence of the bull, as Jessica calls her a creature at the end of the scene. It seems that Jessica is both the bull and the matador. I thought this was quite interesting. Though not all that important to the overall plot, this correlation does bring out a few more ways that Herbert works very concisely with themes chapter by chapter. As you noted, she whirls and turns at every stage, then runs headlong down the hall, rushing to her doom. That's the bull. She's also a piece of property purchased to entertain, a force to be directed with the right ritual, and someone who can be tricked into saying the wrong thing, as we'll see with her conversation with Yueh. Jessica is also the matador who directs and organizes the mayhem around her, is skilled in taking a relaxed stance, or seeming relaxed, to terrify, enrage the bull in the fight, excuse me, and to be able to tease and deflect its attention, a knower of dark things. And at the end of the previous chapter, Paul sees his father's head as a skull, and as you know, later in the story, he'll set up a shrine for his father's skull, perhaps in a nod to his lost family heirlooms, or maybe as a critique of them, if only in his mind. In this sacred memorial, form and fate are one. There's no separation of beastly opponent and man, of killer and mortal flesh. So there you go. And that was... I thought that was excellent, by the way. So there's Cynthia there. We're just reading your letter, Cynthia. Hello. I copied it into a Word document there just to read. So thank you very much for that. And I really appreciate it. And certainly if anybody else wants to fire me suggestions or your ideas in the emails, that's great. But I thought that was a really interesting point about the metaphor working really for Jessica as both the matador and the bull's head. And it got me thinking, actually, because as much as we've glossed over, we've been talking about bulls and mythology and stuff. I think I'll have to possibly put aside a sci-fi Friday or a science fiction Saturday or something like that, for a good natter about that, because it really has brought up a lot, certainly for myself, thinking about a lot of those motifs, the imagery, etc., and stuff that's to come here yet. I suppose that there is a bunch of other. I suppose the other Greek myths, I think, have some of the Greek myths that I was thinking of particularly the Minoan ones, and then of course the Theban ones, particularly relating to Oedipus and his father Laius. I think there's probably a lot more of them within the Dune series, and it's just got me thinking a wee bit. Just thought we could. Oh goodness, sorry, that's my doggy's going a wee bit mad there. Apologize. Everybody in the house is asleep at the moment. Ladies, be quiet. Oh, not that they do what I tell them to. Sorry about that. But yeah, I figured I'd maybe put aside a wee some evening just having a chat about particularly these myths, and particularly the use of the bull in mythology. And I think it would take me to quite a lot of places. So there we go. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. There's Bojack saying good afternoon. Hello, Bojack. Lord Crunk saying hey-oh, and Joseph saying here's the chair dog. And Brad Rose, as creature denotes something that is created. Yeah, is that all animals are creatures, or was mapes created for a purpose in the house? It's interesting because it's one of those words that whenever whenever we denigrate, in some senses in language, we can talk about people being animals. We can talk about them being beasts. We talk about them being creatures, And I always think that these words are quite interesting. A creature is something that's created. And what's wrong with beasts, if you see what I mean, wild beasts, etc. And it's one of those interesting terms. I suppose it depends upon the animal. One of the things, if you read, if you have a good look at the Iliad or read it or listen to it, Achilles is often described, for example, as a dog. And in that sense, as much as many years later, Alexander the Great and Diogenes may view dogs in a much better way. It's very much a negative quality. I suppose it's that dog of war. But yeah, and in particular, it's an important. I think terms like this in Dune are very important. And again, we're going to see this in this chapter, actually, when we get Jessica talking about the Harkonnen animals, those animals. And again, what's so bad about animals? And it's a very interesting thing that particularly with the Gom Jabbar as a poison that kills only animals, this kind of thing, and the separation between animal and human within the Dune universe, I think, is a behavioral one, to be honest with you. But yeah, all very good points, actually. So thank you very much, Cynthia. And I thought that was a great wee way of just sort of running, because I'm always sort of thinking and rerunning things in my head. Excuse me. And I hope our doggies aren't going to be too bothersome tonight. Normally my son's out getting them for a walk about this time, but he's out cold next door. He's had a hard day's work. Yeah, so it's one of those days here. I think we've all got no energy. Hello, Holly. You guys going to behave? I've got a book club to do. Oh, That's a no. Give me 1 wee second, folks. She's not going to behave. Come with me. I'll be right back. Come on. Right. Here. Come on. There we go. Come on, little son. That's good. Keep moving. Come on. There we go. Right. Right. Sorry about that, folks. I've just sort of sent them into the bedroom next door, so they're in with the snoozies. Hopefully they'll have a bit of a nap, and I'll have to get them out later. But yeah, hence the joys of the doghouse, I suppose. So yeah, shall we get going with chapter 8, by the way? But yeah, certainly, by the way, folks, anybody's got any suggestions or ideas, that's what the email address is for. So sciencefictionstation@gmail.com if you want to fire them away. Absolutely delighted, so there we go. So chapter 8, following on from seeing Jessica interact with Leto, we now get to see Jessica interact with Yueh, and I suppose good start off to the chapter. Yueh goes the refrain. 1,000,000 deaths were not enough for Yueh. And of course, this rather savage Yueh, 1,000,000 deaths are not enough for Yueh. This rather savage refrain, in this sense, lines to be repeated again from poems or songs, is from A Child's History. This is another one of Irulan's books, A Child's History of Muad'Dib, and I'd say it's a little bit gruesome. And of course, the only wee thing to note there, of course, is again the past. It's past tense, isn't it? Excuse me, I'm a wee bit all over the place with my throat as usual tonight. It's past tense. 1,000,000 deaths were not enough for Yueh. And of course, we're going to get this little interaction with him and get to see him tick a fair bit, and also learn a fair bit about Arrakis and Melange and water in particular, I suppose, as well. Brad was saying they were lucky on June. Their heat is a dry heat. It's the humidity that hits you hard, like here today. Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I'm absolutely frozen today. I have to say, I don't do too well with the cold anymore. And I used to be great in the cold, and I used to live in London for about 5 years, Brad, and it's what got me used to the heat. I used to work at Heathrow, and in particular, it was just there was no air, and it's the smog and all that kind of the trap of it. I used to melt the first year there. But I imagine, looking in the heat is a dry heat. It's the humidity that hits you hard, like here today. Yeah, I don't think I could handle the heat in Australia, Brad, at all. Now, as much as I've family out there, it does. I don't know. I always think the heat would kill me. But not that I mind the heat. I'd give it a go, I suppose. But it's the sunshine and I'd say it's a pretty. Yeah, I don't know. Saying that it's very cold and wet here a lot. I suppose a bit of sunshine would be nice. It's all about what you're used to, isn't it? But yeah, they are lucky on you. For this, you don't have giant worms blasting through your streets down there. That would be one thing. So yeah, we're going to get a scene set up for us again, and I keep wondering about, by the way, Princess Irulan's, as I would put it, her sense of bias as a historian. I think that's quite interesting. Well, we get this framing of a scene again from Frank. And a door ajar, Jessica entering the room, and this room has yellow walls, and we kind of get to the left we see this, to the right we see that, and sets it all up. I suppose, and some of the things are of interest, I suppose. To your left, low settee of black hide and empty bookcases, hanging water flask with dust on its bulging side. To her right, bracketing another door, more empty bookcases, a desk from Caladan, 3 chairs. The window directly ahead stood Dr. Yueh, his back to her and his attention fixed. And again, that should bring us in mind of the lesson, of course, about not having your back to a door, this kind of thing. And windows, I suppose, are used quite a lot in this sort of, I suppose, no pun intended, frame certain kind of things within the action that we get to see. Give us a bit of description. And I suppose, yeah, it's interesting how characters look through windows or don't bother to look through them at all, I suppose, in some cases. And we get a bit of so straight off again, we're going to get another bit of description of Yueh, and again, it's quite detailed. Um, let's see. Oh, let me swap these books over. So, and again, this description's from Jessica's point of view, who's being quite stealthy here. He's got a wrinkled coat. There's a white smudge on his left elbow, as if it's been smudged with chalk. And she sees him as she's looking at him from behind. She sees him as a fleshless stick figure in overlarge black clothing. And I think quite interestingly, the description of Yueh sort of pretty much matches the description we got before. We're going to get the squarish block of head, the long ebony hair, the sook skull ring at the shoulders seeming alive, etc., etc. All of that. Excuse me. But I think the nice little bit here, sorry, my book is starting to bend into the spine. This is starting to tell the quality of my copy of Dune in terms of how I'm reading it at this point. A caricature poised for stringy movement at the direction of a puppet master. I think we kind of get these kind of descriptions, I think, of his mustache as being a bit stringy as well, don't we? Stringy, stringy movement, fleshless stick figure. Yeah, and so it pretty much matches up with before. And again, I think just refreshing our memory, but we've shifted, haven't we? We're now in a different room, different planet, and Frank's just pretty much refreshing our memory. And we're told that the door to the side leads to the room that Paul had liked, and that Paul's not actually here. And this room, I suppose this is going to be the room that was designed to entice Paul, I suppose, isn't it? And I suppose we get off this little good afternoon, where's Paul? And straight away, I suppose, he nodded as though to something out the window, spoke in an absent manner without turning. Your son grew tired, Jessica. Oh, let me see. I sent him into the next room to rest. This is getting awkward to read, I suppose. This is my copy of the book. At the minute, when I'm reading, I'm losing words down the side here. I can't see them because of the bend in the book, which is a bit annoying. But at least it hasn't started to fall apart yet. It's the little victories in life, isn't it? I suppose. So we're going to find out. I think this is all part of what Yueh's planning, really. And as much there's abruptly he stiffened, whirled with mustache flopping over purpled lips. Forgive me, my lady, my thoughts were away. I did not mean to be familiar. And of course, yes, he did. And I think we're going to find this out. And it's a little bit of an interchange, I suppose the use of formality and embarrassment. And I think this is really interesting to use your name like that. Abruptly he stiffened, whirled, and his mustache is flopping over his purple lips. I think it's quite a comical look to him. So he's asking forgiveness. And of course, it didn't mean to be that familiar. Yes, he did, I think. And again, he smiles. Oh, she smiles, holds out her right hand. Wellington, please. And I've just made a wee note that she's kind of matching his informality here to put him at ease. To use your name like that. And we get this, again, there's a little bit of a timeline presented to us. We've known each other for 6 years. We should be long past that. And it's, these formalities can be dropped in private. Oh, and here we go. The first little sort of run of Yueh's thoughts. He ventured his thin smile, thinking, I believe it has worked. Now she'll think anything unusual in my manner is due to embarrassment. She'll not look for deeper reasons when she believes she already knows the answer. And I think this is quite interesting. As much as we've had a wee chat briefly before about that, it seems that there's a set methodology for messing with a mentat. I think we're getting the formula for how to mess with a Bene Gesserit, if you like, how to manipulate them. And simply put, um, his informality here is deliberate, and it allows him to be self-deprecating and seem clumsy and embarrassed. Everything that puts him at a kind of disadvantage, if we say. Um, and this embarrassment, because it's the way it's going to be read, is this embarrassment is he's all fluttered, he's all flustered. Anything else that follows on within his range of behavior will be misinterpreted by the Bene Gesserit as being down to that embarrassment. And as he comments, she's not going to look any deeper into me what I'm saying if she assumes that I've already figured out the answer. And I think that's really interesting. And I've made a wee point here just to suggest that it's worth looking at. Previously, we've been kind of told there's ways of manipulating a mentat, and they seem quite easy. And we're kind of being given one here on how to manipulate a Bene Gesserit. How this plays out, though, is quite interesting. And I think, as we were talking, Cynthia's point about Jessica taking on some of Leto's qualities, perhaps we'll have a wee chat about that. Just that it's at the very, very end, you know. Goodness gracious, God, I'm not flowing very well today, so I'm a bit bunged up and feeling a bit fluey. Actually, probably just a bit of a cold as usual. So excuse me, folks. I'll try and give it a bit more pizzazz and pick myself up a wee bit. Just feeling I should have a bit more energy. That's all. You know, that kind of thing. Excuse me. Yueh, Joseph says, Yueh always felt like a bad MacGuffin to me. And Brad saying, Joseph, as in, why couldn't Jessica read that he had other motives? Surely that's one of the Bene Gesserit major skills. That as well, says Joseph. Gutsy to poke a Bene Gesserit knowingly. Yes, I agree. I think there's something else about it that as well, as much as we're being shown that these people have all got in their own different ways and the schools of thought that they've been to, I suppose, in terms of how these people have evolved, they have abilities, etc. But that we would maybe think, wow, you know, they're a bit superhuman, aren't they? But they're all quite fallible, I think, and that's a very interesting thing. Regardless of being a mentat, or you know, Thufir is still very human, and regardless of being a Bene Gesserit, you know, that as much as we go, well, what does that entail? Jessica's still very human. We have to assume everybody makes mistakes. Lord Crunk says, I think later in the novel, Paul notes that Jessica is just slightly limited in her observation analysis of certain things. It's an interesting point. Yeah, there's little comments about her abilities here. We've of course been told in the previous epigraph that is it that the Bene Gesserit have grossly underestimated her abilities, but there are limits, and I suppose it seems that there are different talents and abilities within the range of what happens at the Bene Gesserit school. You know, and I suppose in that sense, some Bene Gesserit are selected for their truth, the ability to tell the truth, or to see the truth, this truth sense. There's different roles there, I suppose. But everyone has, yeah, it's one of those absolutes that's kind of spot on, isn't it? Everyone has their blind spots. You know, everybody makes mistakes is an absolute that you can make. I think it's one of the few ones. Yeah, we all do it. I don't think there's any exceptions. And we all have our blind spots, absolutely. I suppose within Shakespeare, the fatal flaw, and I suppose we're also prone to hubris as well. In that sense, I think, yeah, Yueh, Joseph was saying Yueh felt like a bad MacGuffin to me. Yueh works on a whole. I think Yueh's a really interesting character. Um, because I suppose he's not a major villain, but he's almost a cause. I don't know. he's a point of origin in a way for a lot of the things that happen in Dune. There's a religious aspect to him, I think, and hmm, how do I put it? I suppose the idea of the betrayer, the traitor, if you like, the friend gone bad, this kind of thing, is a bit of an archetypal. And there's part of it maybe gets, oh, we'll get it in this chapter. Actually, you get a sense that will he do the right thing? Again, we know this is the problem for us. We have absolute foreknowledge of this. We know we don't know the details. I suppose that's the interesting bit. We've got aspects of the plan fleshed out for us. We kind of have pretty much a good sense of what's going on here, but it's the devil's in the detail, as they say. But that's what makes it interesting for us, I think. In a sense, we want to see how it's going to unfold, and there's kind of lots of hair pulling, almost moments where these characters are, interacting with Yueh, and we're getting to see how very deliberately he's manipulating the people within the household and doing, I suppose, with the help of a few of his wife's Bene Gesserit tricks, as he puts it. But this is all very much a setup in terms of, you can almost, as soon as she comes in the room, whenever she speaks to him, before he says anything, there's just that he nodded. Right, it's like, right, let's go. Here she is. I think he's been composing and prepping himself, getting ready to meet Jessica, to get through this, and his thoughts are very much focused on, this encounter. So we do get his thought process back into what he says, and there's quite a lot to ask about Yueh, and I suppose it brings up a lot of questions about Jessica as well. Let's see. So and again, it's a veil, isn't it? There's a plan within a plan here. And again, it's he talks about wool gathering. So I'm daydreaming. It's an interesting phrase, wool gathering. I always know certain authors use it. I just think it's in a book when lots of different people use a certain term. Depends on how familiar you are with the term, but it can be a wee bit of a giveaway in terms of your characterization. That's maybe having too many characters say a particular term, wool gathering, this kind of thing, daydreaming. But it's an interesting little turn, and I think it's used quite a lot within the Dune series. I think it's a phrase that Frank's fond of. Whenever I feel especially sorry for you, I'm afraid I think of you as, well, Jessica, sorry for me, whatever for. And he shrugs. And here we get the little point. And this is all a manipulation by Yueh. And as simply put, long ago he had realized that Jessica was not gifted with the full truth, say, as his Wana had been. Still, he always used the truth with Jessica whenever possible. So, simply put, for your own safety, don't lie to this woman. And we're going to kind of almost get a sense of that why at the end of the chapter. But we do learn in that sense that Jessica doesn't have the full truth sense. So, in that, there's reasons why things get by Jessica, I suppose, and that's a major one. Though we know his wife did. And it really sort of this fact that Yueh knows about Jessica, well, he's kind of using this against her here, and I suppose it kind of gives him his setup. And I suppose it's one of those things where, as much as there are people with abilities within this universe, there are certain loopholes that individuals can use to avoid, those abilities. This is kind of a manipulation of a knowledge of Jessica, and you kind of wonder, is that from him being her doctor, etc., knowing about the wife's abilities, Wana's abilities? Has he got sort of inside information from Wana? And and I suppose we also know that there's been about, as we got that, that they've known each other for about 6 years, which lines up with the various dates, etc. So he shrugs, and again, it's about using the truth, and we can point out what he speaks is the truth. I think throughout this chapter, it's almost almost identifies it to be certain himself. Um, you've seen this place, my Jessica, and that's a really interesting little my Jessica. Now he's meant to he's going what he's trying to say there is he starts by saying my lady, and then ends up saying drops out the lady, switches to Jessica, and ends up saying like my Jessica. And I just made a wee note that I thought that was interesting. That was it accidental or a deliberate stumble there, and it came across as being possessive. You know, my Jessica, and then we get this so barren. This place so barren after Caladan. Again, that word barren is interesting. It'll be used a couple of times here. And the people, those townswomen we passed on the way here, wailing beneath their veils, the way they looked at us. And yeah, you get a little bit of a sense of a few things here. I don't know. He stumbled over the name as well. We kind of have this, and I suppose the phrase used after that, plunged ahead. And we kind of get this sense of things are running headlong, if you like, that there's a momentum gathered, and that the language kind of matches up with that, I think. So we get this little sort of odd little interchange between them, and it's to do with the strangeness, I suppose. And it's on. I'm not too sure. I've kind of put, is he anxious about it, or has he got contempt here of these wailing women? And it's a fact that he points out they're women, I suppose, is also interesting. And the way they look at us. And the other wee thing I wanted to point out this chapter, I suppose, is that there's a lot of stuff to do with the way people are looking. You know, what looks are in particular importance here. I think whether they be stares or glances or this kind of thing, appearances as well are quite important here. Now, let's see. So, Jessica, where are we? Jessica folded her arms across her breast, hugging herself, feeling the crysknife there, a blade ground from a sandworm's tooth, if the reports were right. And she sort of says it's the strangeness too. We get the strangeness to them. We're strange to them. The world's strange to Jessica and Yueh. Different people, different customs. They've known only the Harkonnen. And here we go. What are you staring at? And the crysknife at her breast, by the way, is a constant reminder of coldness, the coldness of that blade there. And goodness, I'm going to come up for air and check on some of your comments here, just as we catch up, folks. They've been flying away here. Let's see. Everyone more interesting politics, says chat. Without it being contrary to his demeanor, the story sort of just stops. So I understand why Herbert chose to create Yueh this way, but it feels cheap to pretend that nobody knew about his wife. It's one of those kind of again, a lot of lost details, if you like. There's things that we were pointed out that we're not really quite too sure about. Sometimes it makes me wonder: is that have details been lost to history? That kind of thing. One was managers, they don't keep records of marriage, etc. Yeah, you know, you wonder kind of if one has been kidnapped by the Harkonnens and is being tortured, why hasn't Yueh gone to the Bene Gesserit? And why haven't they done anything about it? I think that's quite interesting. But yeah, I suppose in terms of oh, hang on. The Venusaur just not so I understand why I chose to create. Yueh's also the Trojan horse, I think, as well, in terms of that kind of, I suppose, mythological overlay. Yueh seems to be fighting. Cynthia says Yueh seems to be fighting some sort of psychic block, talking about his wife, like the Reverend Mother put on Paul regarding the Gom Jabbar episode. Maybe that's why so few know Yueh's story. It's a really good point, and I've made a wee note about it later on, actually. Whenever we get to it, let me see. I suppose what was it? It was a question. It was exactly what you were saying, Cynthia. Mental block. There does appear to be a mental block on Yueh, and what I wondered was who put it there, and I have four possible answers. Either the Bene Gesserit put it there via Wana, the Harkonnens did it to him. It's a Sook thing, or he's done it to himself somehow as part of his own plan to prevent it. If you see what I mean, being a Sook doctor, that was just my own ideas, but that's down the road a wee bit. But absolutely, um, yeah, and we do have to wonder. Yeah, there's lots to wonder about. I think that's what's good about these books. His timing is good that he's doing this after landing on the new planet. This helps that his distracted behavior could be seen as part of adapting to a new environment. Absolutely. And heck, the Atreides don't keep records. Yeah, it's there's stuff that people seem blissfully unaware of. You know, I suppose the point. I think that generally the run with Yueh is that the assumption is the wife is dead, and that everyone kind of assumes that she's dead. I think, whereas he is actually holding out some hope that she's alive. It's interesting whether is she dead or not. It's a kind of Yueh's Wana Marcus, Yueh's wife, is kind of a Schrodinger's cat, isn't she? And I suppose maybe in that sense, that's the thing for Yueh. He'll never know until he gets to actually look at her body and see the Baron up close to know for sure. I think. So from that point of view, I suppose Wana is alive and dead to him. So let me just scroll down here. Brad agreed. Something's really gone bizarrely wrong with the wheel on my mouse. Brad agreed. Jessica was thinking back on her early days of Bene Gesserit training earlier in the Great Hall. The move and uncertainty may mean that she has regressed a bit, thus easier to manipulate. Brad saying, Joseph, it seems the Bene Gesserit don't communicate well between each other, like how Jessica was ignorant of the missionary and protective until the Fremen. I think it's the Fremen tell it to. Yeah, well, again, the whole nature of Jessica's had a boy. Why does nobody know? And I'm sure the answer is because they could. It's not because they could, of Thufir Howit's incredible security. Okay, so if the Bene Gesserit had planned to use Yueh as such, that would actually more sense. I kind of get the sense that it's implied in this chapter. I think Yueh's doubting himself, and I think Yueh wonders that. And it's a good, yeah. Have I been used? Is my relationship with my wife, knowing what I know about the Bene Gesserit and based on what she's told me, is that part of some manipulation? Is that why we've never had children? Is going to appear here, and he knows as a Sook doctor that it's not for any medical reasons. So it must be because, as far as he's concerned, it must be because she's been ordered to not give him any children. And I suppose if Yueh had children, it would divert his focus, wouldn't it, away from revenge? He'd focus on life rather than death, I think. Excuse me, folks. So just when Jessica says Dune must be a hell world, was then she finds what missionary protective legend was used. I'm not sure when that happens. The Bene Gesserit and Harkonnen ain't exactly opposed to doing business together. Joseph says it makes me think the Harkonnen never actually had one. That would be an interesting one if it was all just a bluff. But what happened to Wana, I think, is one of the mysteries of Dune. I think it was we have a bunch of mysteries, and we're going to get, I suppose, a perceived one and an actual one in this chapter as well. And of course, staring out, we're about to get one of our ecological lessons here. What's Yueh been looking at? And it's these 20 palm trees. Well, he initially says it's to the people, but Jessica goes and has a look to the left toward the front of the house where Yueh's attention was focused. A line of 20 palm trees grew there. The ground beneath them swept clean, barren. The second time that word there. A screen fence separated them from the road upon which robed people were passing. Jessica detected a faint shimmering in the air between her and the people, a house shield, and went on to study the passing throng, wondering why Yueh found them so absorbing. And we get this, the pattern emerged. And I think this is really interesting. We get quite a little bit of info here. They're shielded as well. There's a separation between the house and the people. In fact, arguably between the house and these trees and the people, isn't it? I think, and I suppose these guys staring at the people through the window is a kind of juxtaposed with the way the people are looking at the palm trees. And it's interesting that these people in their house that have arrived here have put up a shield, and have actually, the way I've made a note of is that they've actually created a separation of these people from nature. That they've owned, tamed, and possessed this nature, and then separated the I suppose the native people from it. And this pattern that she says they emerged, the way people are looking at the palm trees, there's envy, hatred, a sense of hope, she says, but they all share this fixity of expression. And again, these patterns are quite interesting. And odd little discussion sort of follows, but do you know what they're thinking? There's a sort of, we're not, we don't read minds, this kind of thing. But this is one of our big ecological lessons, and I've called it the lesson of the date palms. There are 100 of us. This is what the Fremen or local people think. And so what we have essentially is that one date palm, and it's a man's problem, that's the way it's presented to us, isn't it? Little bits of information, and yeah, this is quite interesting if we don't know about things like this. One date palm requires 40 litres of water per day. A man requires but 8 litres. A palm, therefore, equals 5 men, and there are 20 palms out there, 100 men. And again, it's quite sort of matter of fact, isn't it? On this planet, water is going to be incredibly important, but the water provided to these trees is life-sustaining to people, and they're kind of separated from it. And of course, it's a proper little lesson. We all need X amount of water per day, and I think Jessica's response, and we got this in there, that the way people were looking, she's observing, she sees envy, hate, a sense of hope, and so this, I suppose, the hope, is the positive thing. And there's people out there looking at it with a sense of hope. But this is kind of scuppered for us, isn't it? It's really shot down. The hope isn't about, in any sense, water or this kind of thing. It's about dates falling from the trees. And it's a false hope, as Yueh points out, because it's the wrong season. So as much as they can look to these trees, and it actually got me thinking about it. If the trees in the household are separated from the people who are on the road, and they're looking at the palm trees, and the hope that they have is that dates might fall to the ground and roll across. I got it was interesting. I thought that the dates must penetrate the shield if they roll at a certain speed. That's just where I was thinking about that. How did they get the dates? Absolutely love how Dennis did the part. Yeah, I have to say that's one of the good things. I thought that the little scene that they created with the palm trees was quite good actually in June. But again, I don't think we got the lesson from it. I suppose that's. But yeah, and of course we get to see them burn later, don't we? Well, what's the thing with I suppose the fluff with Denis Villeneuve, isn't it? Is it the Oscar nominations that it's one of those where he's picked up is it best movie but not best director, I think. something like that. Brad said, Joseph, explain why the Reverend Mother knew the Duke was doomed. They're a participant, but it then leads to it seeming that they want to give Paul a chance to be the Kwisatz Haderach. There are other things the Bene Gesserit do to support that hypothesis. Dude, yeah, it would be it. Wouldn't it? The Reverend Mother must know the plans. Totally forgot that. Excellent point. There's Peter Zedek saying, I know I always bring up Christian stuff, but I feel like Yueh is the Peter character as he sold out the messianic figure for 40 pieces of silver. Is there a Greek parallel of betrayal and denial? Yueh, yeah, kind of the Judas Iscariot type. A Greek parallel of betrayal and denial. I think there's plenty. Actually, there's a historical one, I suppose, is Ephialtes, the betrayer of the Spartans, this kind of thing. Most likely. Have to have a wee think about that one. Don't worry ever about bringing up Christian stuff, Peter, by the way. There's tons of it in here. So yeah, I yes, Yueh definitely. I think there's a lot of. I was saying earlier, I think there's a lot of religious overtones with Yueh, the betrayer, this kind of thing. I suppose it works on all sorts of levels, especially from within a household, that kind of thing. Greek parallel of betrayal and denial. I think there's plenty. And again, if you think about Yueh being part of the household, yeah, much of even a lot of the Pelopid things, there's certain things to do with hospitality, I suppose. Joe says, we're in the doghouse already. No, Danny tossed the entire ecological messaging. He did indeed, I think. I've a wee bit of hope for it yet, Joseph, using it, hope in the word that we're about to use, I suppose. I think he can solve it, but we'll not know about the ecological message really until we see part 2 of Dune. But I because of what's done to the Kynes character, I find it very, very hard to believe that he can salvage it, unless. But there are different ways that we learn about the environment and the ecology in Dune. Kynes is a huge one, a really important one. But the messages, I suppose, the lessons also come from the Fremen, and the planet itself, I suppose. So I'm not complete. But yeah, I suppose we do know that the ecological message is gone. I still think it's a very pretty film. I think it looks very good on screen, but I think there's a lot of things that aren't right with it. I don't think it's a disaster or anything, but I don't think it's not the Dune I hoped it would be. I suppose I had really high hopes for it. But I think there's so much missing from the story. But particularly, my biggest gripe with it, Joseph, these days would be really just from a bit. It's a fun movie. It's not Frank Herbert's book, but I just thought the characterization was really poor. That's my big problem with it. And I think if it had been better, it would have made it a much better film. It would have made it a really great film. Peter saying, I'm sorry, Judas. Hold on, Jesus. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. No worries, Peter. Joe Smith, great flick. Danny made a blockbuster Bruckheimer style action film, and that's okay. Yeah, pretty big. Yeah, it's taken its intellectual chops away from it. I think it's definitely not Herbert's Dune in my opinion either. Yeah, but it's still nice to see. I still think it's nice to see it being made accessible to a new generation, and these unfilmable books. I think cinema's the big problem there. Really, there's other. It's not that TV wouldn't be a good medium. I think it's just the cinematic thing. But there is something quite that you want to see these things on a big screen, and certainly in terms of the rubbish that's been at the cinema lately, I think Dune stands out a fair bit. But I think that's its problem as well. I think a lot of the films around it are rubbish. And I still think the best film I've seen all year, folks, was The Green Knight. I thought that was a cracker. Really enjoyed it. But yeah, Oscars, well, what the heck? I wouldn't worry about it too much, Style over substance. Yueh is a healer fighting against his sook training to do no harm, says Chaya. Deep compunctions and also his religious rooting. He's a very torn figure. We see that here. He's working. He almost gives himself away. And it's interesting that as a betrayer, he almost betrays himself here in this chapter. Joseph Smith, I said before, I'm a Dune fan. You can make absolute trash, but as long as it says Dune on, I'll be there. That's kind of where I've been, I suppose. From my point of view, Joseph, I've had over the years. I suppose the goal is to look at everything to do with Dune to get as full a picture of it as possible. So yeah, I'm still looking. I want to check. No, I was just about to mention that, Brad. I was about to say I'm still looking forward to checking out this B movie that came out there. But Joseph, have you seen Planet Dune yet? There you go. I was about trying to remember what it was called. You've preempted me, Brad. Yeah, Joseph saying not yet, Brad. It's on my list. On my list too. Yeah. The hope about the dates is a false hope, I suppose. And I think whenever we're talking about hope, Jessica says I think we're running too critical an eye over this place. There's hope here as well as danger. But remember the Reverend Mother's comments about hope. Hope clouds observation. Hope is generally seen as not a good thing. I'm hunting for an 84 Dune lunchbox. If anyone has a lead on excellent condition 84 merch, there you go. Let Joseph know. Oh dear. I don't know. I've got some weird stuff, I have to say, but I'll said I'll do this maybe at the end of the book club. Actually, one time, Joseph, what I'll do is I'll try and literally dig out everything I have on Dune, and we'll go through it one day. I did try to take a big photograph of all the Dune stuff that I had, and it was a lot. But then I'd realised there was a bunch of stuff not in it. Is Planet Dune online or in theaters? I haven't seen it anywhere. I'd imagine it should turn up on streaming services soon enough. If we could only do a group tuning of Planet Dune, yeah, that would be good. That would be, I will. If it turns up on Amazon, I think you can do that kind of thing, or Netflix these days. That would be interesting. It's a good idea. Straight to DVD. Hope is a 4-letter word. I find hope fascinating, Brad. If you know the story of Pandora's box, hope in Greek mythology is personification is called Elpis, and I think particularly it's a very similar. There you go. I suppose who was asking me that? Peter, you were asking before about the sort of Christian references there, treachery, etc. The idea of I suppose the Adam and the Eve and the fruit of the tree, or the apple, as many people like to think of it. There's a similar thing with the don't ever accept gifts from the gods. This is Prometheus and Epimetheus and Pandora. Of course, this box, supposedly it's Epimetheus that opens it, but Pandora gets the blame, if you like, one of those things. So the idea is that everything that's really bad in the world is inside the box and it's out. And the box is closed at the last minute, and there's one thing left in the box. And the thing that's left inside Pandora's box is Elpis, Hope herself. So the question then becomes, everything that's in the world was in the box. So that the question becomes this, and it depends on how you look at it. Does hope remain in the box for the day it's needed to be let out? It stays there. Or the fact is that because hope's in the box, that it doesn't exist in the world. It's a really interesting myth, if you like, and it's one of those ones that you could interpret it a couple of different ways. In my life, hope leads to nothing but disappointment. Sad face, says Joseph. I run it. Hope as something as kind of like wishful thinking. I think you start to hope for things whenever you know that it's not going to happen. It's one of those things. If like I hope I pass my exams. If you did the work, you probably will. It's that kind of thing. But you'll start saying, "Oh, I hope I pass." If you haven't done any work, that kind of thing, Um, hmm, hmm. Oops, excuse me, drop me later. But it's yeah, particularly the stories of Pandora and Hesiod's Theogony is a good read. Excuse me, having a wee puff there. Ah, I don't know if I've mentioned Hesiod's Theogony much, but if you like your Homeric epics, the contemporary of Homer with that stuff is Hesiod. Excuse me, and he's if you buy Hesiod, you'll probably get the two books together, and it'll be on free online. They're called Theogony and Works and Days, and Theogony is kind of your Greek, I suppose, cosmological creation of the gods myth, if you like, that kind of thing. That's pretty good, actually. I really like it. It's a nice wee short read as well. Now, where do we get to? So yeah, we've had the last lesson of the date palms, and this other little chat about mentioning of hope again. And I suppose is it Jessica sort of seeing things that maybe they're looking at it with hope. It's not quite how she interpreted it, and Yueh points this out for her. And we look at this place with too critical an eye, and then we get on to there's hope as well as danger here. The spice could make us rich. With a fat treasury, we can make this world into whatever we wish. And it's there's that kind of a Trudy's thinking. We'll change it. I suppose we can make this world into whatever we wish. And the next little thing that comes out of her here really is that she laughed silently at herself, and her laugh emerges. The laugh broke through her restraints, and that tells us that she's not always got the control, I suppose, that we think. Emerging brittle without humor, and she says, "You can't buy security." And I think it's really good. This little part of it, it's she's laughing at herself. She's actually, can you hear yourself? Are you serious? You're funny, Jessica. It's real. What on earth are you talking, woman? You're real taking the piss out of herself, if you see what I mean. And I think as much as it shows maybe her lack of total control physically on one side, it also shows that she doesn't buy into her own self-deception. She's mentally very, very controlled and aware, and as much as these thoughts arise within Jessica, no, don't buy that. You don't be silly, And of course, we get a little bit. The key point there is you can't buy security, and it's probably a truth. I think I put down there, and it's probably the one thing that's pressing most on her mind at this point. Good old Thufir's security. And we get this, and this is one of those little things that happens in Dune. I think it's happened quite a bit so far. Yueh's thoughts here. He turned away to hide his face from her. If only it were possible to hate these people instead of love them. In her manner, in many ways, Jessica was like his Wana. Yet that thought carried its own rigors. Sorry, trying to read this. Hardening him to his purpose. The ways of the Harkonnen cruelty were devious. Wana might not be dead. He had to be certain. And we'll get him blinking back tears in a wee bit of a second. But this is the forgive me if I don't know what you think about this, but this is the point where pretty much there's been several characters who are don't look at me. They're on the brink of tears, and they do much to turn away and hide faces, I suppose, which is kind of a bit of an obvious thing, I suppose. And you kind of have to wonder sometimes, do the Bene Gesserit really need to be that well trained in body language? All the men seem to have a wee bit of bother controlling their emotions. And I think it's just this interesting it's a very physical turn away, if you know what I mean. It's a very obvious thing that you're not going to be hiding your emotions particularly easy that way, I think. Let me see. So yeah, we get a lot. There's quite a bit there actually. he's averting his gaze, hiding his face, turning away from her. But as much as if it only were possible to hate these people as well as love them, and it, he makes the comparison between Jessica and his Juana, his wife, and it doesn't actually give him more compassion. It doesn't kind of soften him totally. It makes him harden to his purpose. I'm going to go on with this, you know. Um, but what we get really out of that is that the Harkonnen's pretty cruel, pretty devious, and the possibility that his wife isn't dead, and this is his motivation really. Um, and he has it's really that's his reason for all of this. He has to be certain. He's got to have certainty. And it's not, yeah, it's a bit sad. I think that's maybe a wee bit where I think Wellington Yueh's character falls down a wee bit, I suppose. And it's a reasonable motivation, but it doesn't quite strike me as a kind of almost rational. I think there's plenty of other things possibly that he could have done to investigate. Who knows? There are plenty of spies around in this universe, I suppose. But it steals him to, yeah, I'm gonna bring about the doom of this woman and her family pretty much as far as he's concerned. I mean, he has plans for them as well within these plans. So, but there's no essential guarantee that anything will go well. And I think what comes out from Jessica here, don't worry for us, Wellington. The problem's ours, not yours. I think I've just put a big massive no, and I think that's very. I think that's corrected in a wee bit here, but I think it's very uninsightful of Jessica. I think the Atreides problem is everybody's problem who's had to come with them, and that includes Yueh. And as he points out in a wee bit that the whole Atreides feud is this web that he's got entangled in, his wife's got entangled in, and regardless, these people are an active part of it, if you like. Group viewing used to be awesome. Xbox had a Netflix app that you could watch together. I've never done a group view thing like that at all. The closest thing is to go to the cinema with your friends, which has been a long time. Nope, my life hope leads to nothing but disappointment. I think you can do without things like, if you just go, yeah, I don't need to hope about things if you go about your business the right way, I think. Sad face. When you hope, you align yourself with what you want to happen. For a neat update on Pandora's box, check out John Denver, the box. Oh, we talked about that before, Babs. Thanks very much. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I did have a wee look at it. I'll just go back a wee bit. Hope does nothing, hard work gets the job done. I'm beginning to think when Frank mentions cleared by security, start the side eye. Yeah, it's almost a mention of Thufir's security is pretty much followed by something not yeah, it's rubbish, isn't it? If Juana didn't give him children via Bene Gesserit order, was it because there was bad genetics involved? I don't know. It's an interesting one, and he says that she loved him. But is it Paul? There's some questions that kind of arise in this chapter, particularly when for Leto nothing. There's an awareness of events happening in the future, particularly this nexus that's coming, if you like. And it's quite possible that the Bene Gesserit have seen Yueh there and his role in it, and that I suppose certain things, if he had children, I think he wouldn't go down this road of revenge. Well, saying that, who knows? Because we get some thoughts on that in this chapter as well. But I just thought it was a wee bit uninsightful of her. Our problem's not your problem. Not at all. I think if you work for the House Atreides at this point, the Atreides Harkonnen feud, plus the threat of the Emperor, etc., all of that is your problem. And again, we get his thoughts, and here we go. This is the bit where he's blinking back the tears. She thinks I worry for her, and he's blinking back tears. And I do, of course. I get, it's hard to pin him down, isn't it? But I must stand before that black baron with his deed accomplished, and take my with the deed accomplished, his deed accomplished, sorry, and take my one chance to strike him then where he is weakest, in his gloating moment. I think it's a good way of putting it. He sighed. And his thoughts, let me see. He does worry for her, but he's at the same time, what's he worrying for? I suppose it is kind of hypocritical, and that he's going to be causing a lot of her problems in that sense. And I like the phrase "the gloating moment" there. I thought that was an interesting point. And we get this sigh, which is almost a kind of audible indicator, I suppose, for a wee bit of a shift in the tension. It gives us a wee bit of a reprieve for Yueh here, and a bit of a break in the tension. And the thing that I've asked here is, and I wonder what you think, guys, at this point, we're getting to figure out a little bit about Yueh. His wife's either murdered or tortured by the Harkonnens, all of this stuff. The question I'm asking is, are we getting sympathy for him here? And my own answer, and I'm curious what you think at this point, do you feel sympathy for him as a reader? I've written no. And it's kind of I'm wanting to feel sympathy for him, but there's not enough there. I think he's not doesn't come across as sympathetic. Certainly tragic, certainly trapped, but not sympathetic at this point. And we get a little shift in the tension here. As I said, we get Jessica sort of asking, would it disturb Paul if I looked in on him? Not at all. He's had a sedative, so into drugging our kids. And Jessica asks if he's taking the change well. And apart from being a bit overtired, he's excited. But what 15-year-old wouldn't be under these circumstances? And he's in here. So, and I think it's a very good point that I suppose it kind of gives us a little bit of emphasis still on the fact that Paul's still, hopefully, or should be, a kind of normal 15-year-old, reasonably normal 15-year-old teenager, at least in his own attitudes of, yeah, we're on a new planet, yeah, this is going to be great, and probably running around looking at everything and being excited by everything. And of course, whenever we get to the next chapter, we're going to find out that he hasn't actually taken Dr. Yueh's sedatives at all. He's not really sleeping. So what we're getting a point of view here that's kind of deceptive in some ways, but that will be revealed to us in the next chapter. And we get this shadowy room. It has slatted blinds. Let's have a wee look at it. Paul's lying on a narrow cot, one arm beneath a light cover, the other thrown back over his head. Slatted blinds at a window beside the bed wove a loom of shadows across face and blanket. And this shadowy room, it's a wee bit foreboding, isn't it? And as we come in through the darkness, I suppose Jessica takes this opportunity to observe Paul. And interestingly enough, I suppose, the way that she observes him is she starts to note, I suppose, her line's genetic traits, whatever her line may be, within Paul's face, and also notes Leto's family line there. So she, again, just a description of Paul in this sense. She observes that his face is oval like hers, and his hair is coal-colored and tousled like Leto's. He has long lashes and lime-toned eyes. And this is another one where Jessica smiles with her tears retreating as well. Everyone's holding back tears quite a lot. And she looks for as I said, these genetic traces in Paul's face. She's suddenly caught by the idea of genetic traces in her son's features. Her lines and eyes and facial outline, but sharp touches of the father peering through that outline like maturity emerging from childhood. Hmm. And again, there's a roundness often to the softer qualities of Jessica. Leto's features are often very sharp and pointed, angular. Um, and again, I was just sort of was pointing out a lot about looks, vision, glances, these kind of words in this chapter. Um, and even the sharp touches of the father peering through that outline, like maturity emerging from childhood. There's a real sense of the father starting to come out um, as Paul sort of hits maturity. I suppose he's losing his baby fat, if you like, that kind of thing, and his face is starting to sharpen up a lot more like his father's. Yeah, there's some quite interesting little things here. Just the description. She thought of the boy's features, and this is really interesting, as an exquisite distillation out of random patterns, endless cues of happenstance meeting at this nexus. The thought made her want to kneel beside the bed and take her son in her arms, but she was inhibited by Yueh's presence. She stepped back and closed the door softly. Um, and again, we have the happenstance, all of these cues of happenstance, luck, random chance, etc., etc. All of these various things have led to this, you know, her son. As a, what it's a really nice way of describing it. This exquisite distillation out of random patterns, the endless cues of happenstance, meetings at this nexus. It's this nexus that's coming. I also thought that there was again a little bit of a sense of religious overtones there with Jessica almost. Um, Wanting to take her son in her arms, one thing, to kneel, I thought that was a little bit there. And of course, it just allowed this whole little popping in and checking on Paul. It's quite a sensible thing. It's kind of really what the whole point of her being there in that sense. And it allows a little break, as I said, in this tension between her and Yueh. And we come back out and sort of reframe the thing again and get back into, I suppose, this interchange between the two. And we get a bit more of Yueh's thoughts again. He's back at the window. He'd returned to the window and he's unable to bear watching the way Jessica stared at her son. Again, is this just don't, I can't look. It's some of the descriptions I think of how the men deal with their emotions. It's just turning their heads so that nobody can see. I think it's a wee bit funny. Cynthia says Yueh wants to take out the Baron as he gloats. Jessica has just been gloating with her comments about becoming rich, having a fat treasury, and doing what she wishes. So, on what basis does he love stroke hate? Yeah, I think I also get the sense as well that it's maybe only the it's the gloating of the band that's the only opportunity that you will get that close. I think. Um, I don't know. There's wee things about Yui's ideas that don't quite make sense. I suppose maybe in how they play out as well. But again, that's to the random, yeah. But yeah, he's out for revenge, pure and simple. I think, and it's there's plenty of revenge to go around in this universe, feuding and fighting and revenging, etc. Um, yeah, and a lot of people suffer for it. I think it all seems quite stupid, actually, when we get to the gist of it. I suppose, yeah. So he's unable to bear what, and I suppose we get that the way Jessica stared at her son, and he runs through a little thought process here. Why did Juana never give me children? It's just what we're chatting about. He asked himself. I know as a doctor, there's no physical reason against it. Was there some Bene Gesserit reason? Was she, perhaps, instructed to serve a different purpose? What could it have been? She loved me, certainly. And as much as he ends with the word certainly, I think that also leaves you hanging with a little bit of doubt. Um, just in terms of what people say and what they actually think. And this story is quite a bit different sometimes, isn't it? Um, And yeah, they're really good questions from you, aren't they? And it's kind of almost as if he's putting two and two together. And I think it's almost that he's not focused possibly on his plan and getting it to work, that he's maybe not considered some of these things. For the first time, hmm, he was caught up in the thought that he might be part of a pattern more involuted and complicated than his mind could grasp. It's the first time it's occurred to him. Possibly that he's had that we talk about the fixity of purpose, is it? Of fixity of expression, sorry. That and the use of the term the pattern emerged earlier when we were talking about the way that the local people look at the palm trees. And you've got this sense that he's had a fixity of his mind, if you like, that he's been single-minded, just focusing on this revenge that for a minute he hasn't really stopped to consider. And it's kind of almost all just hitting him, I suppose, possibly to do with the association that he sees Juana being quite a lot like Jessica. Can anyone else hear the clock ticking in the background? At this point in the story, it's ominous. Yeah, oh, I always take it out actually when I'm doing the audiobook. Sorry about that, I hadn't thought about it. But yeah. Special effects and all. TikTok. And as I said, that's where I feel sympathy for Yueh, by the way. As much as I was asking myself the question earlier, do I feel sympathy for this guy yet? Is Frank trying to make him sympathetic here? Seeing this play out, this conversation, what's Frank's goal here? And I went, no, I don't feel sympathy for him. And at this point, she loved me, certainly. That's where I go, oh dear. And there's possible, you poor sap, this kind of thing. There is possibly a little bit of sympathy there, that after everything that he's done, he's almost uncertain whether his wife loved him, and I think that's a really bad thing for Yueh. I think it would be absolutely heartbreaking for him, and he's not having happy thoughts here. I said it's for the first time this has struck him, and Jessica stopped beside him. What delicious abandon in the sleep of a child. And it's a really interesting phrase, isn't it? Delicious abandon in the sleep of a child. Just the loss of all worry, that kind of thing. And I suppose Yueh's response is mechanical. If only adults could relax like that. Yes. Where do we lose it? He murmured. And this is the bit. There's something not right here. She glanced at him, catching the odd tones of ping. But her mind was still on Paul, thinking of the new rigors in his training here, thinking of the differences in his life now, so very different from the life they once had planned for him. So something in her, she stares at him, but she's still distracted by Paul and all of this change. And I think, yeah, quite interesting. The little cues, things that she misses, I suppose. Or maybe it's not that she's missed them, that she's pinged them, if you see what I mean. But they'll catch up later. I get that sense that she'll review the day in her head, this kind of thing. And again, it's one of those wee things where we have a wee look out the other side of the window, I suppose, now. And we see a slope humped with wind-troubled grey-green of bushes, dusty leaves and dry claw branches. The too dark sky hung over the slope like a blot, and the milky light of the Arrakeen sun gave the scene a silver cast, like the crysknife concealed in her bodice. So things keep, I suppose, aspects of what's going on here keep reminding her of this knife. And previously, when they're talking about the way the people were looking at them, and she had folded her arms and was hugging herself, and that's where she started to feel the difference, the wrong sense, the coldness of the blade. And again, we have this sort of look at we're getting a bit of I suppose, a bit of a geography lesson almost, if you like. We're seeing some flora and sort of dusty leaves and dry claw branches. The too dark sky hung over the slope like a blot, and the light itself is milky. It's has a silver cast, and again it reminds her of this knife. And I suppose the sky being too dark, it is the afternoon, isn't it? We get another little lesson here. The sky is so dark, and this is partly due to the lack of moisture, Yueh tells her. And this conversation, this is it. She snaps. The lack of moisture. Water! She snapped. Everywhere you turn here, you're involved with the lack of water. And this is what Yueh tells us is the precious mystery of Arrakis. And this is where things, again, we're getting all these wee lessons. This is another one of our mysteries, by the way. And this is to do with Liebig's law of the minimum. The whole lack of water is the most precious commodity, etc. And we get the question, why is there so little water? And it seems to be a sort of list of the things that we've noticed. The precious mystery of, but why so little? There's volcanic rock here. There's a dozen power sources. There's polar ice. You say they can't drill in the desert. There's storms and sand tides destroy equipment faster than it can be installed. And that's if the worms don't get you first. They've never found water traces there anyway. So what's the point of that? Wellington, the real mystery, and this is Jessica sort of schooling Wellington here, is the wells that have been drilled up here in the sinks and basins. Have you read about those? And his statement is almost as works on two levels. Just first a trickle, then nothing. And I suppose that's about the water, but it might also be a bit about the reading on these things as to what's going on. So, as much as the precious mystery of Arrakis, as it was described previously, is why is there so little water, Jessica identifies one of the real mysteries here. And I suppose just see a separation. It's to do with these wells being drilled in the sinks and basins, and that's the mystery. Trickle, then nothing. It's this kind of motif that runs here. First, there's water somewhere. There's a trickle, then nothing. It dries up, trickle, then it stops. And then there's no more water in a place. And then suddenly, the way this works is another well hole appears nearby. There's a trickle of water for a little bit, and then it stops, it dries up, and that's it. And Jessica sort of wants to know, why is no one curious about this? Why is nobody asking questions about this? And of course, Yueh's quite a sharp mind on him. I think always bright in knowledge and so on. And this kind of little interchange between the two of them allows us to sort of get a few questions asked, a few answers provided, and a few speculations given, I suppose. Yueh, has no one been curious? Yueh suspects living agency. Someone's up to something. And he asks a question about, wouldn't stuff like this show up in core samples? And Jessica sort of points out that it's almost dismissive of this. What would they show? Would they show alien plant matter? Would they show alien animal matter? What? It's impractical. The water is stopped. Therefore, someone stops it. Someone plugs it. And again, it's it's a very sort of practical cut through the nonsense around the issue and what is the real problem, if you like. What's going on? And we get a little bit of a little bit of education here. And it kind of makes us think, well, hang on. Let's have a wee look at what they have to say. The water stops, someone plugs it. That's my suspicion. Perhaps the reason's known, he said. The Harkonnens sealed off many sources of information about Arrakis. Perhaps there was reason to suppress this. What reason? She asked. And then there's the atmospheric moisture. There's little enough of it, certainly, but there's some. It's the major source of water here, caught in wind traps and precipitators. Where does that come from? And Yueh says he asks the polar caps. Cold air takes up little moisture, Wellington. She's educating him here. There are things here behind the Harkonnen veil that bear close investigation, and not all of these things are directly involved with the spice. And this little interchange, just as we're getting up to it, is of course quite an important little bit in the book. Before we get to it, so why would the Harkonnens bother to suppress information about there being very little water on Arrakis? That seems obvious, therefore kind of stupid. Most of the water that's on the planet comes from atmospheric moisture, and there's little enough of it. But the major sources of water, therefore, through things like technology like wind traps, precipitators. So where does the water come from? I suppose it's a question about the water table, isn't it? The water cycle on the planet. Yueh's response, well, is it what about the polar caps? Cold air takes up little moisture. It's not enough to answer the question, to fill the gap, if you like. And that's going to be a little bit of a motif recurring with, I suppose, some of the ecological investigations, particularly to do with, it's a thing that runs with the Pardo kinds in the wee mini adventure, and with Liat, as we'll see, about the relationship between the worms and the spice. Not everything. It's quite interesting. Not everything's to do with the spice here, but of course we're getting to that point where, and it really is just that little bit of venom that breaks off with Yueh here. Where are we? We are indeed behind the Harkonnen veil, he said. Perhaps he broke off, noting the sudden, intense way she was looking at him. Is something wrong? And the way you say Harkonnen, she said, even my Duke's voice doesn't carry that weight of venom when he uses the hated name. I didn't know you had personal reasons to hate them, Wellington. So that must be pretty bad. And Harkonnen's quite, again, it's Hark. It's kind of a harsh sounding name, isn't it? Yeah. It's an interesting way this works in the story. It's just the use of their name almost gives him completely away, and not just his hatred and his venom, but it seems that Duke Leto has an awful lot of hatred and venom for the Harkonnen. Dr. Yueh's got even more, and again she asks him, "You must have, I didn't realize you had personal reasons for hating the Harkonnen, but if there's something badly wrong here. It's the level of his hatred that really makes her, and he's extremely worried at this point, I think, because it makes him break up his sentences, even he's distracted there. Is something wrong? The sudden, intense way she was looking at him, that has him worried. Great mother, he thought, I've aroused her suspicions. Now I must use every trick my Wana taught me. There's only one solution. Tell the truth as far as I can. And he basically goes with the story of his wife. Again, there's no harm in truths with the Bene Gesserit, I suppose. There's nothing to detect as a falsehood. So, yeah. Yueh's thoughts. First of all, I thought the invocation of the Great Mother by Yueh is quite interesting. He's aroused her suspicions. He's got to use every trick Juan has taught him. And here we go. He said, you didn't know that my wife, my Wana. He shrugged, unable to speak past a sudden constriction in his throat. Then the words would not come out. He felt panic, closed his eyes tightly, experiencing the agony in his chest and little else until a hand touched his arm gently. And it kind of breaks it, doesn't it? Forgive me, Jessica said. I did not mean to open an old wound. And she thought, those animals. Wow. So we were having a wee chat about this earlier, guys. This is a mental block, isn't it? An absolute full-on mental block. And he's got to go with the truth and explain what's happened to his wife. And even there's something he can't quite get out here. And I think it's really interesting. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know what you guys think about this, but I thought there was actually who's put the mental block on him. And is it going to be, is it a Bene Gesserit thing? Quite possibly a Bene Gesserit thing. It seems to be their style. Excuse me, but we're also told there's other kind of inhibitors and conditioning within this universe. Excuse me, in particular, imperial conditioning with the Sooks. So I went with a run of who would put this mental block on Yueh. Bene Gesserit, yeah, that makes sense. The Harkonnen, sure, also makes sense. The Sook, possibly not, unless it's something to do with his imperial conditioning. And then I actually thought about, surgeon heal thyself. What if Yueh had done it to himself to prevent him, to harden himself to his plan, to prevent himself from giving away the thing, from turning away from his purpose, if you like. It was just a sort of fun wee experiment in my head there, but there you go. I'm so bunged up today, folks. I'm going to have to blow my nose in a wee second. I'll catch up with your comments here a wee second. Let's see. Donald Lee, hi Donald. I think the blind spots of the Mentats and the Bene Gesserit is Herbert emphasizing the skills aspect of the holism theme. Skills are learned and can be mastered. A Messiah is a kind of master. Herbert has split the threefold structure of the human into its parts with the three schools, Bene Gesserit, Mentat, Guild Navigators. The schools each master one and downplay the other two. Paul must master all three if he's to become a Messiah. Excellent, David. Sorry, Donald. Thank you very much. There's Stephen Campbell saying evening, sir. Evening, Stevie. How you doing? Thanks for joining us, guys. Very interesting. I think it's one of the things that some people look at Dune and see these schools, these abilities. It's one of the discussions we had about the kind of the psi powers, if you like, of that era of science fiction, and that they really are meant to be learned and taught abilities, and that to certain people, I suppose, even to a certain extent, these people would seem very, almost superhuman in a way. But they are skills and abilities that are learned and taught, as we see. Even Yueh knows some of these tricks. But yeah, it's some of the blind spots of is Herbert emphasizing the skills aspect of the holism thing. Skills are learned and can be mastered. Yeah, I think the blind spots are interesting. And yes, Paul's kind of got. You're absolutely right. Paul has to he's part Bene Gesserit, he's part Mentat, part Guild Navigator. Really, in a sense, he is a fusion of the three, all three, and yet none. And there's another thing I suppose we were just mentioning there, Donald, is that when Yueh's in the Great Mother invocation is a Trinity kind of, I don't know, almost all-encompassing syzygy, if you like, but it's a male, female, and neuter, isn't it? Sort of being, and I thought that lines up with what you were kind of saying as well, with the Bene Gesserit, the Guild, and the Mentats. Very interesting. Yeah. The slowing down of speech can be a sign of dishonesty. I suppose it could. Yeah. It seemed very violent. It's it almost, and he doesn't come out of it until Jessica's put her hand. It's a gentle action that kind of removes the thought, but it definitely, unable to speak past a sudden constriction in his throat. Then, and the words would not come. It felt panic. Closed his eyes tightly, experiencing the agony in his chest and little else until a hand touched his arm gently. It really does sound like a some kind of block, doesn't it? That something has some sort of you know, yeah, I don't know what's the word, compunction or something like that has been placed on him. It's a very interesting little moment, and it does really make us ask what's this about? Who's done this to him? I suppose by the time we get through the book, we're well aware that this is the kind of thing that the Bene Gesserit can do. But it's just that other agencies can work with this kind of thing as well. Well, I've actually just the sudden constriction, guys. I've put this down as a wee question mark. I've just put, is this an act? Question mark. But generally, that's as I turn the page, I've written some kind of mental block, and I've written 4 options over the page. Is it an act though? It's quite possible. And of course, this runs into this a little bit with Jessica's thoughts here. And forgive me, I seem to have opened an old wound. Those animals. Um, um, again, it's one of those terms that I quite like, animals. Those animals. And we've got lots of exclamation marks going around here as well. A fair amount of Bangaria, by the way. This chapter starts off with a bit of Bangaria. I don't know if I pointed it out, which is the overuse of exclamation marks in a work. His wife was Bene Gesserit. The signs are all over him. And it's obvious the Harkonnens killed her. Okay, is it? Here's another poor victim bound to the Atreides by a cherub of hate. And this is an interesting little turn of phrase. But first of all, I suppose, put it this way, to Jessica, Yueh is so obviously married to a Bene Gesserit. The signs are all over him. How he behaves, how he speaks, how he does certain things, whatever. But it's being Bene Gesserit manipulated or trained or loved, if you like. It's obvious that the Harkonnens killed her. Not so sure. Sees him as a poor victim. In that sense, he is bound to the Atreides by a cherub of hate. Now, how do we look at this word? And the word cherub is an interesting word, from the word harem or cherub, and it's to do with war or property. This is just off Wikipedia. As used in the Tanakh, there's 2 meanings. One is something that's devoted to God, but the second one was, or the other meaning is under a ban, or a prohibition, refers to things or persons to be utterly destroyed. And I thought that word works both ways there, I think. And it's a very particular word, isn't it? Cherub of hate. And we get this, that all of the people, that the Atreides household, if you like, that Gurney Halleck, we understand already, slave pits, torture, etc. We're getting Yueh, they've killed his wife. We're not too sure on Thufir, but he's been within the family for 3 generations, etc. And we'll get Duncan for the same sort of thing. All of these people that work for Atreides, the Atreides, are bound to them by their hatred of the Harkonnen, and which is a very negative thing. And I suppose the hatred thing with what Jessica just excuse me, with what Jessica just realized about Dr. Yueh. Oh goodness, I should drink more fluids. Is that Yueh hates, I said, we've already pointed this out, Yueh hates the Harkonnens even more than Leto. And the suggestion is nobody hates them more than Leto. But that Leto's little kind of thing is, I'm going to form a gang of people who all hate the Harkonnens, come and work for me, So we get, of course, he's unable to talk about it. That's true. So things that kind of pick up, that ring true to Jessica. And we have Yueh doing this very deliberate tactic where, as much as he hasn't been able to speak or whatever it was he wanted to say there, he's bringing a level of truth to what he says, or else I'd argue a level of vagueness. Let me see, where are we at? 43. 43, there we go. Oh, no, no, 45. Yeah, and we have, I'm sorry, he says, I'm unable to talk about it. He opened his eyes, giving himself up to the internal awareness of grief. That, at least, was truth. Anything that's truth here is okay, providing it's framed in the right way, I think, as far as how he's interacting with Jessica. And we get this again. Jessica studied him. Oh, excuse me. I'll take another wee drink here, folks. Sorry, my throat's very dry. All this talking, isn't it? In fact, I'll tell you what, folks. Can you give me a couple of wee seconds? I'm going to take a minute or two, quick break. I'll run to the loo, and I'm going to take a big slug of honey and see if that helps my throat. I'll be right back. Let's see if I can speak a little bit better. Excuse me. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Oh, my ears have popped out, and I suddenly seem a lot louder in my own head. That's my negative pressure thing. And I've just had a big slug of honey. That's much better. Got to medicate, haven't you? I'll catch up with some of your comments here, folks. Let's see. Brabison, the slowing down of speech can be a sign of dishonesty. This goes to what Joseph said, that the Bene Gesserit may be in league with the Baron and the Emperor. They have known each other for 6 years, says Brad. So we don't need to be formal. Yet I don't. Yeah, I didn't know you had a wife who's in the same school as me. Very strange. Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's skip the loo, my darling. It is, there are lots of sort of little odd things in the Dune universe, I suppose. Maybe it's just that, everybody's on 1,000 different planets, and maybe communications and travel's expensive anyway, isn't it? But yeah, everybody seems a wee bit oblivious to certain things. And I suppose as we're building up, Dune works in a very interesting way anyway, I suppose, in terms of our foreknowledge and the historical documents, etc. But there are gaps and there are inaccuracies, and I think it's meant to be deliberate. And certainly, as we've been reading up to this point, everything we've been told about Leto really, to me, came across in quite a propaganda-ish kind of way. He wasn't really as advertised, But we get another description up close and personal this time. Jessica is studying him now, and as much as that little, the hatred thing kind of got him to sort of scrutiny him a wee bit, he is under scrutiny now. And she's having a good look at him, seeing the up-angled cheeks, the dark sequins of almond eyes, the butter complexion, and stringy mustache hanging like a curved frame around purple lips and narrow chin. The creases of his cheeks and forehead, she saw, were as much lines of sorrow as of age. A deep affection for him came over her. And that's really it. It's working, isn't it? She has a good scan of him. We get that sort of mention of Yueh's age again. And a deep affection comes over her. And you kind of go, why? And as Brad was pointing out, it's been 6 years, hasn't it? Is it sympathy? And interesting, as we were pointing out earlier, when Jessica says, our problems aren't your problems, really. This is where we get the change in that shift of understanding. I think, Wellington, I'm sorry we brought you into this dangerous place, she said. It's that's I think a more honest admission. It's not kind of our problems aren't your problems, because that's nonsense. to anybody who's come along with these people. Um, in for a penny, in for a pound, they're all in it together. And I suppose the one thing I think that as Joseph Sincrease, I never thought of the Bene Gesserit Harkonnen connection before. You got to remember about the Bene Gesserit. I suppose that arguably they're in every household. And in the sense that there's almost a separation of women in the Dune society, but they're everywhere. If you where women are, the Bene Gesserit are. That's pretty much the way I look at it. And I suppose the interesting thing about the Dune, this novel that we're reading now, is that the real kind of parallel to the Bene Gesserit aren't in this book at all. They're maybe mentioned once or twice, but the Bene Tleilax don't turn up in Dune, and they kind of give a balance to that kind of intrigue that's going on in the universe. I think actually it gives a much better balance to the Dune universe. I think. With the Emperor, and he could utilize these resources with the Bene Gesserit. Yeah. Well, he does utilize the Bene Gesserit as a resource, doesn't he? He's got his truth. Gaius Hel Mohiam is his truth sayer. But there's a price, isn't there, at the end of the day? No boy children for Shaddam the Fourth, But yet and I suppose it's kind of, once again, we know that Yueh's, oh no, Jessica, don't trust this guy. He's the traitor. I feel a deep affection for him now. And it's kind of, oh no. It's a bit of a face palm moment from our point of view, because again, we know. And his responses here lead us, I suppose, to another little lesson. But his response is, I came willingly. And again, he's telling the truth. He did. He's here because he wants to be. And what we get next is a fast little run of information. We do get this quite a bit with Frank. This whole planet's a Harkonnen trap. You must know that. And he does know that. It will take, and you must know that as a phrase. I suppose that's used a few times whenever it's saying, come on, don't be stupid. That kind of thing. It will take more than a trap to catch the Duke Leto, he said. And that too is true. He's always playing word games. It will take more than a trap. As I've written, it'll take a traitor as well. In other words, him. So again, there's a kind of almost a grim humor to some of this for me, I suppose, in our knowledge, I suppose. And then again, this kind of deprecation from Jessica. Perhaps I should be more confident of him, she said. He's a brilliant tactician. And I think this is more delusional. I think this is Jessica just deluding herself again. Leto's meant to be a brilliant tactician, yet he's walking into a trap like this. That's again, I don't see it myself. And we get this little analogy where we go over to talk about the idea of the Atreides as a family being uprooted. And it's interesting that Yueh uses we've. He includes himself in this. We've been uprooted, he said. That's why we're uneasy. And how easy it is to kill the uprooted plant, she said, especially when you put it down in hostile soil. Pardon me. Yueh's response here. Are we certain the soil is hostile? And again, I suppose the soil is a metaphor for the planet and its people. And we get a little bit more info. There's been riots, and they haven't even been here this long. And again, we're going to learn another water lesson here. We're going to learn a little bit more about water and why it's so important. There were water riots when it was learned how many people the Duke was adding to the population, she said. They stopped only when the people learned that we were installing new wind traps and condensers to take care of the load. There is only so much water to support human life here, he said. Excuse me. The people know if more come to drink a limited amount of water, the price goes up and the very poor die. But the Duke has solved this. It doesn't follow that the riot means permanent hostility towards him. And More information. There's been water riots. And this is about Duke Leto adding to the population. And we've been told that these riots have stopped whenever the people have learned that he's put in extra wind traps and condensers to compensate for the water needs. So the idea that there's only X amount of people that the water can support on this planet is really crucial. And you get this kind of little flow chart here where more people equals more expensive water, which equals the poor not being able to afford water, which equals them dying. And there you go, pretty much is your hydraulic despotism and the real nature of economics on Arrakis. That regardless of um, whatever your amount of melange, etc., you have water is of vital importance here. Um, and simply put, it's again, this is to do with competition for resources, and what we'll look at later on. We'll have a good chat about it. Is Liebig's law of the minimum, um, which is quite interesting. Yeah. There's if anybody wants to check it out on the community page on the YouTube channel, I think we have a diagram up there of Liebig's barrel, which kind of explains the principle of the law of the minimum, but that a system is governed by the resource that is least in abundance in it. I suppose in this case it's water. Oh, where are we? But yeah, and the Duke has solved this, by the way. Once more, this is another one of Herbert's wee motifs here. Got to come up with got to start using a different word other than motif. um, hmm. Let me see. This is what's called the Presbyterian fixation. Excuse me. And Herbert's quite interested in this, and it's actually to do with a bit of a spat about science fiction in general, and particularly authors like Isaac Asimov, who I think Herbert would hold up as a champion of what's called the Presbyterian fixation. And simply put, the Presbyterian fixation is this much flaunted idea within science fiction that we can solve all of our problems with more technology. So bringing a bunch more people creates a new problem. Not enough water for everybody. More technology is the way Leto solves the problem, and that's what we call this Presbyterian fixation. It's partly to do with how Herbert views Western man's attitudes to ecology and the environment. The other thing that we learn here, I suppose, is that there's guards and shields everywhere at this point, and as much as we kind of got the sense that that technology was normal, um, we did not live this way on Caladan. Uh, guards everywhere, and shields. You see the blurring of them everywhere you look. So it's not just that this technology. House Atreides kind of they have their shields and all of this stuff back home on Caladan, but you get the sense that they're only really for emergencies, that kind of thing. And of course, Yueh says, "Give the planet a chance." Which is a bit hypocritical of him, I suppose. Give it a chance until you're killed by my trap and my deception, you know. And what follows is quite interesting, I suppose, in terms of it's a wee discussion about Thufir Hawat and how he does his business, really. And yeah, I suppose it's Jessica. It almost comes across as Yueh thinks that possibly Jessica is maligning Thufir, but she's not. She actually says, "I praise him." I'll just read it to you here. Jessica continued to stare hard-eyed out the window. "I can smell death in this place," she said. "Howard sent advance agents in here by the battalion. Those guards outside are his men. The cargo handlers are his men. They've been There have been unexplained withdrawals of large sums from the treasury." um, let's hope Howard knows about that. The amounts mean only one thing: bribes in high places. She shook her head. "Where Thufir Howard goes, death and deceit follow." "You malign him, malign, I praise him. Death and deceit are our only hopes now. I just do not fool myself about Thufir's methods. Um, and again, it's something of what we were talking about previously. I think it was that Cynthia mentioned that how kind of Jessica was kind of taking some of Leto's attributes in a sense, that harshness, that toughness. Brad says the doctor's story is messy, really. His wife goes missing, he disappears with the Harkonnen, and then he shows back up and is hired by the Atreides without any investigation into his missing time. Indeed, and Joseph says, indeed. It's more than an afternoon to break his programming. Yeah. Again, it's how we look back at you, and I suppose it's the telling of the story. And I think the details that were being given by the omniscient narrator, there are real obvious gaps. Sometimes we're actually directed by the omniscient narrator to look at things that we shouldn't be looking at when actually, here, no, show us this. It's kind of deflective sometimes, I think. And yeah, I suppose what Frank's trying to show is, that people are fallible. And yeah, the thing with Yueh, I suppose, Yueh, I do think works on a number of different levels. I suppose the more we approach his doom, I suppose the better we'll get a sense of him. But yeah, I suppose Yueh's memory is enshrined in a funny way, in the same way that Leto's is, and where Leto's is. Everything we read about Leto in these epigraphs, what a wonder, he was wonderful qualities. Everybody admired him. Even the Emperor thought, why do I have to fight Leto? If only we could have been on the same side, we could have been best buds. you really do get this sense about him. It's quite funny. But yeah, Yueh's memory is enshrined as well in these epigraphs, I suppose, and throughout the book, and it is in the role of the traitor, the person who brings about the death of the father, if you like. As much as we were talking about before, in a kind of funny way, is Yueh the Leto's bull? Cynthia says riots over the water use by the incoming Duke seems like a local issue, local scarcity. If there are actually millions more people on the planet than what the official records say, that's a very good point. We've only got X amount of water for X amount of people. We're pretending that millions of Fremen don't exist. Planet Gin is the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Badum, yes. That was a great song. Stab it with your speary knives. The Eagles. I was listening to one the other recently, and I didn't realize. I suppose it's. I found this out not too long ago. But is it? Oh goodness, what do you call it? The Source? Is it not the Sorcerer? It's a tune by the Eagles, and it's the theme music to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What do you call it? The Sorcerer's. I don't know. Is it the Sorcerer's? Eagles. Is it the Journey of the Sorcerer? That's it. Having a wee listen to that, and I didn't. I kind of knew it was the Eagles, but for some reason in my head, I kind of must have blotted that out for years. But the Journey of the Sorcerer, yeah, by the Eagles, is the theme from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's a pretty girl that you call friend. I stopped. Good night. Good night, said the shadow. The well dipper. Yeah, you could have fun with that, I suppose. It's a good song, Hotel California, I have to say. Yeah. I've played that a fair bit. I quite like playing the bass on it. It's got a kind of a reggae kind of thing to it, So yeah, Thufir's security, and Thufir's a man of death and deceit. I think the interesting bit is from almost the advice here from Wellington is keep yourself busy, dear. Don't think about it. This kind of, I think I put it just almost condescending. And of course, we get a little bit of information about Jessica. Is actually we find out what her job is, and Jessica is the Duke's secretary, which is quite interesting. And I think this is I'm being completely honest with you. I must have missed that word before, but I never noted. I just thought, as much as I know that she kind of ran his household, I never actually noticed that she called herself the secretary to the house, if you see what I mean. I don't know why I didn't pick up on that before, but it's an interesting profession, if you like, in context with the times. And she wonders, and again we get this. It's something that echoes what something that echoes what Dr. Yueh was talking about or thinking recently, just before there, where he kind of, Wanda loved me, didn't she? Certainly, that moment of self doubt. And I suppose this conversation is following on from the morning conversations where we were having a chat about how pretty much Jessica was bought by the Leto's buyers. And this kind of area of thought comes back into her mind here. She wonders how much of her Bene Gesserit training figured in his choice of me. And Yueh catches the cynical tone, I suppose. What was it she said? Don't you think, Wellington? What do you mean? He found himself. Sorry, let me just read. Sometimes I wonder how much my Bene Gesserit business training figured in his choice of me. What do you mean? He found himself caught by the cynical tone, the bitterness that he had never seen her expose. It's almost like a flip of his exposing his hatred. Here's Jessica, exposing this bitterness, this cynical tone as he describes it. Don't you think, Wellington, she asked, that a secretary bound to one by love is so much safer? And of course, his response is, that is not a worthy thought, Jessica. And he doesn't doubt Jessica's love for the Duke. He sort of notes the way Leto would follow Jessica with his eyes. And again, she gives a little sigh here, which is another one of these little markers for a shift. She agrees it's not worthy. And at this point, you should go, actually, do you know what? That's a perfectly valid question. That's what I've written here. It is actually the fact that you're the person that you love. I mean, also that did it affect his choice of me? Surely it's the buyer's choice of her. I think. I don't know. And she, it is a valid question. And she kind of hugs herself again. This sort of wee repetition of this again. She hugged herself, pressing the sheathed crysknife against her flesh and thinking of the unfinished business it represented. And I suppose unfinished business, what do we mean by that? Death, doom, destruction, violence, etc. And it pretty much, that's where our conversation goes. 56, let's have a wee look. There'll be much bloodshed soon, she said. The Harkonnens won't rest until they're dead or my Duke destroyed. And here's the wee bit here. I suppose this is the gist of it. The Baron cannot forget that Leto is a cousin of the royal blood, no matter what the distance, while the Harkonnen titles came out of the Chome pocketbook. So, jealousy. The Baron can't forget that Leto has a title because of something called royal blood, which is no different than anybody else's blood, and yet the Harkonnens, their titles come from business, if you like. But the crux of it here And this here it comes. It's the obsession, if you like, but the poison in him, deep in his mind, is the knowledge that an Atreides had a Harkonnen banished for cowardice after the Battle of Corrin. And of course, Yueh mutters the old feud. And it's one of those little things that, again, we're getting a little detail or two about the history of the Dune universe. We're not going to find out too much more about it, though. I'm pretty sure Brian Herbert's probably got a book on the Battle of Corrin by now. So it's all to do with jealousy over, a bit of jealousy, and that once upon a time, one of Duke Leto's great, 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 great grandfathers banished one of uh, Vladimir Harkonnen's great, 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 great grandfathers for cowardice. And I suppose that banishment and vengeance kind of thing is a big part of the House of Atreus and all of this kind of stuff. And it is its hatred, its revenge. It's called an old feud. And it all seems really stupid, doesn't it? It's incredible. The old feud, Yueh muttered, and this is probably a good sense of it, I think. For a moment he felt, and for a moment he felt an acid touch of hate. The old feud had trapped him in its web, killed his Wana, or worse, left her for Harkonnen tortures until her husband did their bidding. The old feud had trapped him and these people. Sorry, and these people were part of that poisonous thing. The irony was that such deadlines should come to flower here on Arrakis, the one source in the universe of Melange, the prolonger of life, the giver of health. And it's quite interesting the way this wee bit runs, I think. You get a certain amount of the usual nonsense, I think, with what we call royal blood. But it really emerges just the stupidity, the bitterness, this nonsense going on between these two families really has caused quite a toll on people. It's a web, it traps people, it kills them, or does even worse things to them. And yeah, it really does raise that hatred and you, and it kind of almost makes you think, it calls it a poisonous thing. The feud is two-sided, I suppose. Duke Leto could kind of probably end this by going, I don't, Harkonnens, I'm not bothered. Just enough of this. It's silly. It's beneath us. Let's get on with our lives. This kind of thing. But for how many generations has this been going on for? Got me wondering about how the Duke was killed by the bull. I suppose I'm questioning maybe the fact that he was old, but maybe was it some kind of Harkonnen plot? And so all of these things, all of these deadlines, as Yueh puts it, are how ironic that these things should come together on this planet. All these things should meet at this one point. The one planet that's the source of Melange, and how Melange is described to us here, the prolonger of life, the giver of health. And again, it's time for another wee lesson on spice, our spice lesson. Jessica asks, what are you thinking? And we get the kind of a little bit of an economic lesson on spice. And as much as it's similar to, we had another kind of little lesson like this with the palm trees. Simply put, spice, 1 decagram of spice is equivalent of 620,000 solaris on the open market. So wealth is really important here. And 1 decagram is 10 grams. So £62,000, 62,000 solaris per gram. So if we want to work out how much we're buying, what do I sound like, a spice dealer or something here? And yeah, that's the open market. So the spice represents wealth. And I think everything really, the run here is ultimately greed, I think. And whenever this little change in subject happens, Yueh just says, I'm thinking that the spice brings 620,000 solaris, the decagram on the open market right now. That is wealth to buy many things. And it kind of, does greed touch even you, Wellington? And he says it's not greed, it's the futility. She's misread him a bit here, but I suppose that's not hard when he's being deceptive. And we go, okay, well, what does he mean by that? I suppose that's what futility. What are you talking about? The futility of it all. So we get this little, do you remember your first taste of spice? It sounds almost like an advert, doesn't it? Do you remember the first time you tried melange? Cinnamon? That kind of thing. So it's interesting. And I suppose he describes the drug in terms of life. Of course, it can also be death. But let's see what he has to say about it. He asks her, can you remember your first taste of spice? Jessica answers, it tasted like cinnamon. So they both had it. But never twice the same, he said. It's like life. Excuse me. So the spice never tastes the same twice. It presents a different face each time you take it. Some hold that the spice produces a learned flavor reaction. The body, learning a thing is good for it, interprets the flavor as pleasurable, slightly euphoric, and like life, never to be truly synthesized. And there's quite a little bit of an info dump there, I suppose. We've got the kind of what spice is worth, what it kind of tastes like, and the fact that it never presents a similar face twice. And we get this little thing about learned flavor responses. The body interprets something as good for it, creates a sense of euphoria. And like life, as Yueh points out, like the drug cannot be synthesized. So it's Arrakis or nothing, really. And it creates that we get another little shift in subject here. But it's tangential, I suppose. It's not completely it's not a complete segue. And it's kind of to do with the connection between wealth and what they could do with it, etc. But what you get Jessica saying here is absolutely bang on, I think. And it's a very, here it comes. It's just one of those sort of statements that's slotted in there. I think it would have been wiser for us to go renegade, to take ourselves beyond the imperial reach, she said. And of course, absolutely correct. She's right here. That's where the wisdom is. That's the correct strategy. And it gets Yueh's thoughts going, why didn't she make him? Why didn't she make him? Why didn't she force him? And I don't know what you think about this, guys. I'll sort of throw this out there and see what you think. He saw that she hadn't been listening to him, focused on her words, wondering, yes, why didn't she make him do this? She could make him do virtually anything. And of course, he kind of asks her, doesn't he? But it's an interesting question. Before we get to him actually asking the question, this is what I wanted to know. How many people know this? It seems that even Leto knows this. So you can make me do whatever you want if you say the magic word. Leto go, etc. This kind of thing. Leto on, Leto off. There seems to be the general awareness. I get this sense from the book that people know that Jessica can make Leto do stuff, and if she wants, and Yueh seems to know this. I think Thufir knows it. Leto knows it. Jessica knows it. I think even Paul knows it, maybe to an extent. I don't know. Seems an awful lot of people are aware of this, I suppose. And yeah, I wonder what you think of that. It's an odd one. Let's see. Love the Eagle, says Joseph. It's a nicer title than just Concubine. Yeah, but by now he probably has a book about the last time the Duke went to the toilet. Yes, B-Days of I don't know. Part of me wants to make a few mock-ups. Actually, I'll do a few Dune books for a giggle. The wide and disparate Dune universe. Ah, dear, oh dear. Um, yeah, and I suppose, of course, we get the whole. She didn't make him put the bull's head in the painting in the Great Hall. There was that kind of, I'm not going to force him to do that. But we get this interesting little point here, and it's Yueh noticing this. She hadn't been listening, focusing on the words. He spoke quickly because there was truth and a change of subject. Would you think it bold of me, Jessica, if I asked a personal question? Of course not. You're, I don't know. I think this is a bit of a Star Trek moment for Jessica, if you know what I mean. You're my friend. It is good to have friends. It's one of those things. It's almost like she's trying the word on. And I think you'll find it kind of funny when we get to the end of the chapter. We're not too far to go. Why haven't you made the Duke marry you? Straight and to the point. She whirled, head up, glaring, made him marry me. But and I should not have asked, he said. So it's kind of it's like I don't know what I wonder what she was going to say but what there. And it's like as if, how do you know that I could make him do that? Almost, I don't know. It's a surprise, and it seems that she's got a little bit angry, a little bit surprised there. And of course, he deflects it. I shouldn't have asked, but it's a good question. And she goes, no, she shrugged. There's a good political reason for it. Here we go. As long as my duke remains unmarried, some of the great houses can still hope for alliance. And she sighed. Motivating people, and I think this is a really interesting little speech here. Motivating people, forcing them to your will, gives you a cynical attitude towards humanity. It degrades everything it touches. If I made him do this, then it would not be his doing. And in that sense, I think it's a very, very important little speech there. I can make him do it, no bother. It would be degrading. It would, and not only that, it would be degrading to him. It would force him to her will. It would make her cynical, not just to him, but to humanity. But it degrades everything it touches. It would degrade her love. It would degrade the relationship. It would just crap all over it, I think, is really what she's saying there. The voice is another well-known skill of the Bene Gesserit, says Brad. Is this her love, letting him free? Could the Emperor's machinations actually be by the Bene Gesserit themselves, with the Reverend Mothers using voice on him? Easily, yeah. The scary thing, I suppose, within the Dune universe is how easy the Bene Gesserit can control anyone. And which actually kind of asks you, why don't they? If it just takes a word. But it's absolutely, the Emperor is being manipulated on a level anyway, isn't he? And we need this kind of conflagration. The Emperor's kind of has to be involved in it too. And we certainly know that the Bene Gesserit have had an impact on his life by the fact that they will not produce him sons. Though at the same time, having 5 daughters is good enough reason to create political marriages, which would strengthen his position, I suppose. So motivating people. It's very interesting. It's about leadership, I suppose, but in a sense that this can work on all sorts of levels, and just in general everyday life. Was it rhetoric? I suppose is the art of persuasion, motivation, but we would also say it's the art of manipulation. The same thing to a degree, forcing people to your will, if you like, convincing anyone to do anything. There's ways of going about doing it. I'm pretty good at it. And I'd argue I've discussed this with people before. I'm very benevolent about it, um, because I do know how to do it. Um, yeah, generally, I think we mentioned the other day. If you want someone to do something, it's generally the best way to get is make them think it was their idea, or that they're being helpful or sympathetic in some way. This kind of thing. Um, and it's useful. It's just you kind of need to sort of reach out to people in some ways, figure out what makes them tick, and manipulate them on an emotional basis. And that I suppose that's the art of rhetoric, if you like. It degrades everything it touches, so it's a bit like spin. I suppose these things can be done in a positive and a negative way. Um, and if you do it in a negative way, yeah, it is someone will go off and do what you want. There is something quite um, vile, absolutely vile about it. If you can convince people to do something, for example, by example, I'm going to carry my rubbish out if you'd help me carry the rubbish out too, this kind of thing. That's a better way of getting people to do things. Um, but it's a very important speech, and I think it's very, very truthful. Motivating people, forcing them to your will, gives you a cynical attitude towards humanity. It absolutely does, and it degrades things. It does. If I made him to do this, and it would not be his doing, and then she would simply know that it was not his desire that got him to marry her. It was her will, I suppose, force, and that's what. And I think it's a great thing for Jessica's character here. It really sort of shows her working on a few different levels, and again, it makes her actually more sympathetic, but not only that, stronger. I think elevates her in terms of, I suppose, that what are looking like petty, emotions, the petty squabbles of the men in this universe. It certainly elevates her at this point above all the rest of these individuals. Certainly well above Yueh. Certainly above Leto. That there's a nobility in what she did. She will not degrade her love. She can have what she wants. It's as simple as that. If that's truly what she wants, she can have it right now, and she won't take it, because by taking it, she'll ruin it. And I think it's a really interesting. Oh, it's almost a paradox for her, isn't it? And of course, you notes this is what she says here is a thing. It's also the thing Wana might have said. Just kind of is there an element of Bene Gesserit axioms in there or something like that? But it's also a truth again. And at this point, I suppose that this affinity that he sees between Jessica and his wife, the hand comes to the mouth. He almost gives himself up here. This is the reason why I was wondering: is the block maybe put in by him in case he did this? That he wouldn't. He would, as much as he talks about steeling himself to moving on with the plan in this chapter. It's possible that he had a bit of foresight that he might have, his sympathy might be his own undoing here. He put a hand to his mouth. Sorry, he murmured, this too is truth. He put a hand to his mouth, swallowing convulsively. He had never been closer to speaking out, confessing his secret role, swallowing convulsively. I think, yeah. Again, is there, a block there? The other thing we have to wonder about Yueh's block, by the way, it just occurred to me, is that if someone has put a conditioned him, he's had some sort of imperial conditioning before, and that's been broken. Who's to say the block can't be broke? But he nearly confesses his secret role in the whole thing. And the last wee bit here, I suppose a wee bit more to go, but Jessica spoke, shattering the moment, freeing him of it again, I suppose. And what she says next is absolutely brilliant, I think. Duke Leto is really two men. One of them I love very much. He's charming, witty, considerate, tender, everything a woman could desire. Pardon me. But the other man is cold, callous, demanding, selfish, as harsh and cruel as the winter wind. That's the man shaped by the father, her face contorted. If only that old man had died when my duke was born. And I thought I did it as a wee list of sort of Leto A and Leto B. Leto A is loved very much, charming, witty, considerate, tender, and is all that a woman could desire. Wow. What a guy. Leto B is cold, callous, demanding, selfish, and harsh and cruel as the winter wind itself, and is shaped by his father. Um, he's very opposites almost, isn't he? He sounds positively schizophrenic in his attitudes, and I think arguably that way that she's torn about him. I think she loves him and all those good qualities. And this, in hindsight now, whenever we were looking at, excuse me, in the previous chapter, where she was damn you, damn you, damn you at the painting of the Duke's father, you know, where I was kind of wondering, was that about Leto? Oh, damn you for you and your picture. It was actually aimed at the person, at the father in the portrait. It was damn you was all aimed at him. And the day, if only that man had died the day Leto was born, you know, she sees that Leto's father is the main bad influence on him. All of Leto's bad points seem to come from the old Duke. And yeah, I suppose it's interesting that if only he had a different upbringing or someone else, I suppose. And we must assume that this old Duke, excuse me, has carried on this vendetta, this family feud, this art of family, and you know, his father before him, and so on. So, in the silence that came between them, there's a bit of a, you know, all these revelations, etc. In the silence that came between them, a breeze from a ventilator could be heard fingering the blinds. And she takes a deep breath. Leto's right. These rooms are nicer than the ones in the other sections of the house. She turned, sweeping the room with her gaze. If you'll excuse me, Wellington, I want another look through this wing before I assign quarters. And the chapter ends with a quick thought process from both of them. One very brief from Yueh, and of course, and he thought, if only there were a way, if only there was some way not to do this thing that I must do. And I said he doesn't have to do it at all, but it's in his own head. There's a must. I must do it. And I think that was in his justification at the start of the chapter, wasn't it? It's a thing that he must go about doing. But we end the chapter with Jessica's final thoughts. Excuse me. And I think this is going to be interesting, especially in what we were talking about earlier. Brad saying Leto B is everything a man needs to survive in the great houses. Cold, callous, demanding, selfish, harsh, and cruel. Yes, but he doesn't have the love of a good woman. Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah, it's what qualities I suppose that it's maybe about balance, I suppose, as well. But Leto seems to be. We're either told he's all singing, all dancing, wonderful. Whenever we see him, he seems to be quite, you know, absent-minded, distracted, callous. I suppose is the least of the words I think there that would apply to him. But of course, and I said Yueh's last thoughts are, if only there were a way not to do this. And of course there is. But Jessica's last thoughts are interesting. They're kind of framed by a bit of a hesitation. And it's simply, you know, as she's heading out, this is the end of our chapter, she dropped her arms and crossed the hall door and stood there a moment, hesitating, then let herself out. All the time we talked, he was hiding something. Holding something back, she thought. To save my feelings, no doubt. He's a good man. Again, she hesitated, almost turned back to confront Yueh and drag the hidden thing from him. But that would only shame him, frighten him to learn he's so easily read. I should place more trust in my friends. That's the end of our chapter there. But in terms of what Jessica's exit there, that's scary. And as much as there's X amount of sympathy being built, I think, for Jessica over the last couple of chapters, it's almost all stripped away in that moment. And the only thing that tempers that really is the fact that Yueh is a villainous, traitorous sod who's working against her. Yueh's hiding something. Oh, sorry, give me a wee second. My dog's got a plastic squeaker. Give me that, Yueh. Don't be eating those. Good girl. There we go. Oh, so these toys. The plastic squeakers. Life's very good at hearing them. Try to get them before she munches them. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, Yueh's hiding something. He's holding something back. And of course, she misjudges him here. It's to spare my feelings. Oh, what a good guy Yueh is. And then that, and it's literally, I'm almost going to confront him. And the way it's put, I will drag the hidden thing from him is forcible. And hello, Holly. and I think there's a certain irony here at the end. She says that she doesn't do it because it would shame him and frighten him to show him how easily he is read by her, and that has to be ironic, doesn't it? Because she hasn't read him properly, and it's been a sort of feint and a feint within a feint, almost, if you like. And the end of the chapter, kind of, I should trust my friends more. No, and it's watching, but there's a level of violence in that thought at the very end. That's just kind of what I wanted to point out. I thought she almost went and confronted him, and it's like, I'll rip the thing from your head and be done with him. I want to, if only she really wanted to know what he was thinking, and that I should trust my friends more. No, what a terrible, terrible mistake. And of course, it would frighten him to show him he is easily read if she uses her abilities. And I dare say it wouldn't go down well within the Duke's household. But there you go, folks. I don't know what you think. It's a great chapter, I think. A really good chapter, and it works really well with the previous one. Just as I said, we have Jessica working through here, and we're getting to, nothing is really what it seems. As much as we're getting all of this information and being informed this, that, and the other, our knowledge is still building up on the planet, and we've got an awful lot of info about the scarcity of water here, and the ramifications of having more people on a planet, and almost the obscenity of the palm trees, this kind of thing, and the level of concentration and I suppose forcing oneself to focus on the necessity of water causes Jessica almost pretty much to snap. Water, she snapped. And it permeates everything. And it's I suppose with everything else on their mind, this big concern over water, it's going to be quite important. And again, we have a bunch of mysteries. Our mysteries are building up. As much as I suppose what happened to Juana Marcus has kind of evolved into, is Juana Marcus alive or dead, or possibly both. And yeah, we're starting to get our characters fleshed out a bit more. We're seeing Yueh's motivation, and yeah, it's an interesting world, I have to say. I thought it was a really, really interesting little chapter. It's not little at all, I suppose. It's a decent sized chapter, and it's going to run along into the next one, where we're going to see Paul's sort of point of view here. And again, the lessons all keep coming, Let me see. Yeah, the next chapter, of course, is the Hunter Seeker, Paul and Mapes. And again, another interaction with Mapes, who I really like as a character, I have to say. Bam. There we go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that tonight. Those that are still with us, there's plenty of chat there, I suppose. But yeah, it's a good wee chapter, and the action's starting to pick up. We're starting to get this sense of tumbling towards the inevitable of the fall of House Atreides, etc., and the action changing and so on. There you go. Goodness God, we've got that finished a wee bit early today. That's one of the quickest ones we've done. I think we went through that quite business-like, I think. Oh, excuse me. But listen, folks, I'll tell you what, as usual, thank you very much for joining me. I've got doggies barking and we're all a bit knackered here. And we'll have another chapter to go through on Sunday for chapter 9, where we start off with, that's page 71 in this edition. Many have marked the speed with which Muad'Dib learned the necessities of Arrakis. So we'll look forward to running through that. And as I said, hopefully, throat being well enough, maybe be on tomorrow night for a Science Fiction Friday. And who knows what we'll be chatting about. So keep a wee eye out for me, providing there's no major disasters or anything. So in the meantime, folks, sorry to wrap up a wee bit quick here tonight, but thanks very much for joining us as always. A massive contribution tonight. It's been great. And as I said, if you've got any wee comments or questions or anything at all to do with what we're talking about, I know some of you have to rush off, etc. Just like Cynthia there, fire me a wee email at sciencefictionstation@gmail.com. And I've got company. Look at this. Hello, this is Holly Dolly, Holly Holiday. You all right, big love? Huh? How you doing? You all fed up tonight? So listen, folks, these girls are looking out, and it's a miserable cold night. So thank you very much, and take care of yourselves no matter where you are, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night at 9 o'clock for Science Fiction Friday, and then on Sunday at 9 GMT for our next chapter of the Dune Book Club. Thanks very much, and take it easy no matter where you are. All the best, folks. Goodbye. Well, big love, are you looking to go for walkies? Huh? Is that what we're